Hi, welcome to my channel. This story is about losing all his organs. A guy traveled through the world of wishes, hoping to return to normal life. After going through life and death and completing the last test, Wang Ming was finally able to fulfill his heart's desires. The story begins with the guy starting to slowly regain consciousness. He saw only bright yellow circles of light in front of him. His vision began to recover. The boy couldn't understand where he was. Could he have traveled back in time? He opened his eyes and wondered what he was doing here and what this incomprehensible feeling of emptiness inside was. If you work too hard, there really can be an emptiness. He began to remember how the woman had comforted him. Suddenly, the boy looked down at the table and was very surprised. He hummed and reached for the items on the table. In front of him was a scalpel and many different sharp objects that were lying in a jumble. The protagonist picked up the scalpel from the table and looked closely and saw drops of blood on it. He thought about it and began to remember what had really happened. His look changed, and he was very frightened. The kid looked at himself and saw that they had cut him up like a pig. They even took his kidneys. The protagonist started yelling for someone to call the police because he should file a complaint against them. He wanted to find his kidneys and regain his strength as soon as possible. But when he got up from the table, he started to fall down. The boy fell face first onto the cold floor. One of the men asked Dr. Lin if he wasn't supposed to take only the kidneys. The doctor replied that the situation was dire, and prices had dropped a lot. They said to take whatever they could get. The man then asked if he meant that they would gut him. The boy reached over and pulled out his cell phone. He couldn't figure out where the button to call was. They're kidding him because he's about to drop dead and they're giving him some fucking game. The protagonist decided that he was finished. His head was spinning very badly. The boy thought he had an open wound. In front of him, he saw his great-grandmother. She waved to him to greet him. The kid told his great-grandmother that he didn't want to die. The phone had some weird heart with a knife inside. It was pierced right in the middle. Granny kept looking at him and smiling. The protagonist didn't take his eyes off that creepy heart with a blood-colored dagger. The great-grandmother smiled a creepy smile. The kid decided he had no other choice and had to try this. The game he saw on his phone was called Wish World. The protagonist pressed the start button. But what he had here? It was written about a forbidden desire meant for him. Death can't be stopped. The will to live can't be stopped. A woman lay in a wooden coffin with her hands folded one on top of the other. Streams of sweat began to trickle down the boy's face, and he grimaced in horror as he stared in front of him. He couldn't figure out what the hell else it was. He decided to listen to God's blessing and pressed for a positive answer. He said he wanted to live and wanted to find his kidneys so that he could regain his strength as soon as possible. The boy couldn't understand what was happening. He had fallen into an incredible world of desires. The main character got caught up in some game, and there was one piece of good news, which was that he was still alive. The bad news is that the organs in his body were actually gone, and it was just awful. The boy cast his gaze sideways again when he heard some sound and saw a flashlight in front of him. The lantern hung just above his head and illuminated like a portal ahead of him. The protagonist wondered again what it was. A gray-colored bus entered this portal. A girl began to get off the bus. Where did the beautiful girl in black silks come from? But when the kid looked closer, he saw a creepy girl with a smudged face in front of him. The boy moved his eyebrows to his nose and stared at this girl, not understanding what she was doing here. He decided to take it back. After all, he was looking at an ordinary girl in black tights. She began to walk toward him and looked at him with her empty white eyes. The protagonist was thinking about the fact that by the rules he should have been very scared. But he has a void in his body instead of organs, and what has he got to lose? The kid stopped in front of this girl. He decided he would not lose his non-existent dignity. He began to look at her closely. Then he asked if she could kill a man who was already dead and looked into her empty eyes. The kid exclaimed that when he thinks about it, his empty chest gets even wider. He smiled and opened his arms and then spread his arms out to the sides. The girl reached her hand out to the kid and asked him very affectionately to get on the bus. The main character decided to listen to her and see what was going on here. He started walking towards the bus. The girl kept asking the young gentleman to get on the bus. She repeated this time after time and stopped in anticipation and looking at him questioningly. The kid wondered if she heard him. He had just addressed her. The girl again asked the young gentleman to get on the bus. The flashlight that shone behind the protagonist seemed to be alive and illuminated everything around him. The girl began to change little by little, and her face was even worse than originally. Streams of blood began to run down her face, and it was just a gruesome sight. She opened her mouth, and foam began to flow out of it, and droplets of blood splattered around. Instead of teeth, the girl had fangs that became bloody and creepy. The kid in turn grinned echidically and said with a laugh that there was not a single organ left in his body. does she think to scare him with her antics? And he reached for the monster girl. The kid slapped that monster's face with the palm of his hand with all his might, and more drops of blood splattered around. He ordered the girl to tell the young gentleman once more to get on the bus. The monster girl gave him an angry look and said that she had been very careless. She admitted that she hadn't dodged in time. The protagonist crossed his arms over his chest and asked the girl if she would say it or not. Then she clenched her teeth again, which were very ghastly and crooked. She stood and threw the kid a baleful glare and called him a kid. The monster girl asked him quite politely to get on the bus. The boy smiled wryly and gave her a satisfied look and replied that it was better that way. The main character began to approach the bus and finally started to get on it. When he looked in the mirror, he noticed that he was even dressed up pretty well. At that moment, the gears of fate began their movement. The boy looked inside the bus. He wondered what kind of shabby bus it was. There were a lot of people sitting in it. The people on this bus were empty-eyed and very sad. The kid found one empty seat next to a girl who was sitting right next to the window. He took a seat next to this girl and asked the miss what her name was. The girl was somehow frightened and sad. She sat very modestly and looked sadly at the boy. That creepy monster girl walked onto the bus again and welcomed everyone to the wishing world. She asked the people sitting on the bus to heed the god's whisper. The protagonist grinned and threw a scornful glance at the monster girl. She explained that their ordeal began at that point and smiled menacingly in all her crooked and ghastly teeth. At the same time, in reality, the events that took place in an abandoned factory. The guy with glasses was wearing a green long robe with drops of blood on it. A second man was outside the red car and asked if he had taken everything. He was asked not to worry, and the man replied that he had already done everything. A girl stood in front of him and smiled at the man and exclaimed that it was a good job. The guy with the glasses smiled back at her and moved his eyebrows to his nose and asked her to contact him if she needed anything. But suddenly the muzzle of the gun was pointed right at his forehead and he was very surprised. When the girl pulled out the gun, she asked him not to do anything stupid next time and asked him if he understood. But the boy did not have time to answer the girl as she fired a shot and he flew straight to the cold asphalt with a bullet in his forehead. After the boy was killed, the girl began to remove organs from his body. First of all, she took out the beating heart. The monster girl raised that heart in front of her and mumbled that she could hear it. At the same time, inside the wishing world, on a bus. The girl informed the people on the bus that their first test was called Elimination. She explained that the task was simple, so she asked those around her to listen very carefully. In 10 minutes, they will be driving over the old bridge. But this bridge is too dilapidated. It can't hold all the passengers on the bus, and it's slowly starting to crumble into small pieces. When this bridge finally collapses, everyone will die. Her gaze was sly and insidious. The monster girl kept explaining that if one person got off the bus, they could pass safely. The passengers were very frightened when they heard about it. Their eyes changed, and there was no limit to their fear. The girl continued to explain that they could vote for the person who would leave them, or they can make someone leave this bus. Only those who pass the final test will be able to fulfill their wishes. The girl monster explained that they only had 5 minutes to make a decision. One passenger put his hand up and asked what would happen to whoever left that bus. The monster looked with her creepy eyes at the passenger and replied that of course he was going to die. The protagonist wondered about it. He wondered if he was dead or not. Death is not so terrible, much more terrible than a phone that is not formatted. One of the passengers asked not to be kicked out. The girl was pregnant and said that her baby was not yet born, and she could not die. Another man raised his hand up and exclaimed, looking at those around him, that he had cancer. Another mumbled that his son is now in intensive care and he can't get out of here. The little guy exclaimed that his dad was a fireman. He got hurt badly helping people and he should save him. All the passengers found some reason not to get off the bus. The protagonist noticed that everyone had a tough argument. Compared to them, his desire to get his organs back doesn't seem so trivial. The girl said that time was running out and they had to vote. One of the passengers voted for a pregnant woman. Reasoning wise, they should exclude the weakest participant. The monster girl was very surprised, but after all, this is their test. Who knows what lies ahead? The girl started screaming that she was pregnant and asked how they could do that to her. They are not human beings at all for making such a choice. One of the men replied that this is a world of wishes. They all have desires they want to fulfill, whether they are considered cruel. But what about her? The man went on to say that she was using the pregnancy to morally blackmail them into dying for her. Isn't she the cruel one here? The girl clutched her head with her hands and began to cry bitter tears. All the passengers off the bus started kicking the girl off and were in agreement with the man. For the sake of their team, they started pushing the girl off the bus, but she screamed and begged them not to. The girl tearfully begged not to be kicked off the bus and continued to cry incessantly. A kid appeared in front of her and looked straight into the poor girl's eyes. People kept pushing her off the bus. The girl kept pushing back and begging them not to do it. The monster told them to get the matter resolved quickly. She informed the bus passengers that they were all almost there and threw them an angry glare. The protagonist couldn't understand why she looked like she had accomplished some goal. The pregnant girl kept screaming for help. She kept talking about her baby and stretching her arms forward. She pulled her hand toward the bus, and the guys smirked evasively, looking her in the eye. Suddenly, her hand was grabbed by one of the passengers. He pulled her as fast as he could to him. It was the main character, and he asked, didn't they say they had to vote? He explained to those around him that he hadn't voted yet. Then one of the men said that his vote no longer mattered. The passengers began to exclaim that it was their joint decision, or he wanted to die in her place. The kid replied to the passengers that they had been wrong all along. She said someone would have to leave the bus, but she didn't say it would have to be one of them. The girl monster was surprised by this turn of events and threw a scornful look at the protagonist. She explained to the kid that the bridge was less than a minute away. If they didn't kick her out now, everyone here would die. The protagonist noticed that the girl monster was now in a panic and wondered. The man pushed his glasses to the side and said it was her test, not his. The boy asked him to think about it because he claimed it was for the team. So why don't they eliminate someone who isn't part of it? They could get rid of the monster girl and everyone would stay on the bus. The protagonist asked if they were for or against. If they got rid of this girl, no one would have to be killed. The passengers exclaimed, asking the others how they hadn't realized it before. They all started pulling their hands up and talking about how they were agreeing to this. Everyone voted in favor of eliminating the monster girl. She was very surprised and frightened. She did not expect such a turn of events. The protagonist explained to the princess, smiling evasively, that it was now time to leave the bus. The monster girl started screaming that they couldn't make her get out of here. But the protagonist replied to her that when he got on the bus, he slapped her, but she didn't do anything to him. If he is not wrong, the reason is because of the rules of the game. She can't harm the passengers whether he says the right thing or not. The girl started calling him cheeky and held out her hands in his direction. The boy asked what cheeky meant. How could a brat like her be on the same bus as him? He grabbed the monster by the hair with his hands. After which the protagonist asked the girl to get off and threw her out of that bus. The door immediately closed and the passengers were pleased with this outcome. The next stop was announced, namely the Weeping Dusk. One of the men said that it looked like they had passed the first test. The other exclaimed that they should have thrown that conductor off the bus from the beginning. The man thought that how could you ever force a pregnant woman to go to her death? The protagonist looked at his hands, which were glowing with a golden light. He wondered if he had just gotten the loot from that girl. He remembered her asking him to get on the bus and talking about how he could get the power of evil spirits. They were just words in his head, and he couldn't understand what was happening to him again. The angry voice was in his head, and this was definitely it. The kid was a little creepy. That thing in his hand looked like a summoning item. He decided it didn't matter, though, and his life had always been filled with danger. Such a trophy is the result of his accumulated virtue, and he deserves it. Suddenly, the passengers on the bus became agitated and asked what had happened. Why did the bus stop so abruptly? Is it really asking them to get off? The protagonist replied that the second trial had begun. The bus stopped in front of some iron, huge, tall gates. The kid got off the gray bus first and headed for that tall gate. The rest of the passengers followed, and a pregnant girl wondered what it was all about. They listened again and heard an eerie sound not far away and looked ahead. There was an evil, creepy doll with two tails lying in the grass. It stared ahead with creepy, empty eyes and smiled evilly. The monster woman stood in front of the mirror and grabbed her head with her hands and couldn't understand why this was happening to her. Meanwhile, the real world is before us. The woman looking in the broken mirror kept asking why. She had a chance to get her old self back, but that creep ruined it. It was because of him that everything had gone wrong. She wanted him dead sooner, and she was serious about getting revenge on him. The guys on the bus, when they saw the doll lying in the grass, exclaimed that it was a ghost. They couldn't figure out what kind of ghost it was. The boys asked me not to touch her. One of the men said it was just a rag doll. The protagonist said that everyone who was sitting in the back should get up one by one and get out without pushing. The passengers on the bus immediately obeyed this kid and began to carefully exit the bus. Meanwhile, the bus started on its own and began to drive away from the creepy place. The girl asked how they would get out of here if the bus left now. The man replied that it was still unknown whether they would be able to get out of here alive. The boy asked if they were all going to die here. It was very creepy and they didn't want to die. A girl appeared in front of them and asked what they were doing. The girl began to approach the passengers and, correcting her glasses, asked if they were volunteers. She appeared in the doorway and, looking at the boys, exclaimed that she was the principal. The girl asked the boys to follow her. She explained that they had arrived just in time. The old men were already hungry. The guys noticed that it sounded very strange. The girl grabbed the main character's hand. The boy explained to her that it was quite normal to be afraid, and she had no need to be so nervous. He realized what she was afraid of and grabbed his head with his hand. The children are told by the director that each of them will be in charge of 3 teams. On the door, they will find instructions left by the children. They must remember that in order to take care of these old people, they must follow the instructions. If they break the rules, there will be consequences. On the first floor, on the far right, there is a communal kitchen. Each room has its own restrooms. They are all here in a special situation to remember what she just said. The director approached the lobby of the nursing home. When she walked in the door, she told the passengers that this was their assignment for the day. The girl gave the command to proceed immediately. She explained that they were already waiting. She threw them a rather creepy look and told them that as soon as it got dark, they should stay in their rooms and keep their heads down. At night, they must be vigilant and not sleep too soundly. The protagonist went to the door with a sign with the number 203 on it. The director said so many things, but she didn't even mention the salary. The sign said to deliver food to the elderly, mute, irritable, dirty, and useless. The kid thought about that phrase and where the volunteers would get their paychecks. First, he decided that he should go to the kitchen. The protagonist remembered that the kitchen was on the first floor and started to go downstairs. He was walking down the steps to the basement and heard someone talking about something that smelled really good. It was very good, and they wanted more. It seems in this ordeal, if they don't take proper care of these old people, they're going to have a hard time. The boy walked faster and faster, approaching some door with strange inscriptions. Meanwhile, one of the men asked Lou what he was doing. The man replied that it was nothing. But the participant started to say again that he had misunderstood, and he was from a new Oriental cooking school, so he could help cook anything. Meanwhile, the main character had already approached the rest of the guys. He thought about the fact that it didn't matter and that he should just cook a well-done steak for this old man. The boy kept asking Lou if he had seen it. There was blood dripping from under the door of room number 101. Lou replied that he knew, and the job was to clean the room, but it looked like someone had been eaten. He suggested just frying him some meat and adding more chili. At the request of the lady for whom he is responsible likes it spicy, the man immediately agreed with old Lou. Meanwhile, the kid was already opening the lid of the pot and pulling out a piece of meat. He mumbled that this was not the first time he had encountered the wish world, but each trial here was different from the last, so it was harder to avoid danger. However, he wanted to warn the boys that if you fry the meat to a golden crust on both sides, even the neighborhood kid would drool. Whether it was a wish or a dream, if they managed to get to the end, the man advised against trying to raise the dead. The boys began to ask old Lou why. Then the man answered that the dead cannot come back to life. He asked if they were sure that the person they would resurrect was the same as before. One of the men asked old Lou if he meant to say it would be a ghost. The man replied that it's hard to say what will happen. But one thing he knows for sure is that it will not be a human being. Meanwhile, the main character had already raised a plate of roasted meat on his hand. Only those who will be close to death or those whose desires are extremely extreme enter the world of desire. The boy mumbled that he knew how hard it was for everyone to understand, but he had to say it. When the desire consumes them completely, death will seem like a relief. The protagonist had already arrived at the door of room number 203. He reported the food delivery. When no one answered him, the kid said that since no one answered or opened the door, he would come in here himself. The old man never answered him. The boy went on saying that it was time to eat. The protagonist walked into the room and placed the plate of meat on the table directly that was opposite the bed, and the old man slowly began to rise from his bunk and walk over to this table that had food on it. He got very close and started to smell that piece of fried meat. He began to eat very greedily. The main character asked the old man to take his time because he didn't want to choke. The boy said that this time the task was quite simple. He did hit the jackpot. But no sooner had he finished than the old man's face changed, and it was very disgusting. He said to the old man that if he didn't like the steak, he would have told him so. He'd replace it with intestines. And why does he put his hand right over his heart? He has no manners whatsoever. When the old man began to move his hand inside the kid's body, he found nothing inside. The main character was completely empty without any organs inside. The old man couldn't understand how this kid could not have any internal organs. He kept fumbling around in the main character's body. The old man was just shocked and couldn't understand if he was human at all. The old man was very creepy and had fangs instead of teeth, and his eyes glowed with emptiness. The kid asked the old man why he persisted. Who would have thought that even after death he would remain empty? It doesn't matter if he's alive or dead, everyone wants a piece of him, and it's not the first time. He asked the old man if he thought he was a Hello Kitty, and why he's playing hard to get. The protagonist grabbed the old man and knocked him to the floor. He asked why the old man was picking at the food he had given him. The kid grabbed the old man's head and trickles of blood began to run down his body. The kid asked the old man if he wasn't going to eat it and threw a plate at him. The old man began to grunt and persisted. The protagonist did not stop and pressed him with his hand. He asked if the old man thought he would put up with it. Did he still not ask him for mercy? When the kid got the old man on the floor, he wouldn't let his hands off his face, and the old man tried to say something. But the protagonist said, looking at the old man, that he didn't understand a single word. While he was dealing with the old man, a pregnant girl came into his room. She opened the door ajar and asked the kid if he could help her. The girl saw before her an eerie picture. The main character stood over the old man and killed him. The protagonist continued to finish off the old man. His hand rested on the bloody face. The pregnant girl didn't expect to see such a thing and wondered what was going on. She started walking into the room and couldn't stop looking at the main character. The assignment says to take care of him. But why is he so eager to shake his head? The main character kept holding the old man's head and he was saying something very quietly and incomprehensibly. Some voice was telling the kid what he was doing right and it was necessary to kill him. He continued to keep his hand on the old man's head, wondering what he should do next with him. Is that 3 minutes really all it took? Is he serious right now? The kid thought he was weak. He exclaimed that he would use the card again. He began to call the evil spirit to him. A card of evil spirits, at least 3 hours must pass between summons. The kid wasn't too happy about that. He didn't think the thing had time to roll back and his face was covered in trickles of sweat. He decided to explain himself to the old man and said that everything that had happened earlier was a misunderstanding. Then the old man did not attack him, but tried to say something again. The protagonist realized he was back to normal. Maybe he was the one who had scared him so badly. He approached the old man and inquired whether he would eat or not. The old man began to say something incomprehensible again and rushed straight to the plate with fried meat. The boy called him a good boy. He thought about the fact that the evil spirit's map seemed to be able to influence a person's mind, otherwise he wouldn't have such crazy thoughts about smashing his head in. No idea what will happen next, so we need to keep the card as a trump card and not tell anyone about it. He dragged the pregnant girl who was lying unconscious, and she finally started to come to her senses. When the girl regained consciousness, she began to cry for help and begged to be rescued. The protagonist asked her not to be afraid and to listen to him carefully. He has to confess something to her. He is actually from the government. Some things are better kept secret just so she knows he's a good man. So he's counting on her silence. The girl promised not to tell anyone. The boy asked if she still needed his help. The girl replied that she would do anything he wanted just to help her. The protagonist thought about the fact that it's dangerous here, and he can't use the evil spirits card right now. He has to be extremely careful. He told the girl that he would help her in any way he could, but he did not promise anything, and he did not intend to risk his life. The girl immediately thanked him, and the boy asked her to tell him what she had. The girl explained to the kid that her assignment was to wash the old man's back. Meanwhile, an hour ago in the lobby, one of the men said that the crazy woman didn't like the way he cleaned up and bit his ear off. The other said that he had to massage the old man's back, but it was covered in pus. The third said that if he had not run away quickly, he would have been eaten. They found the ordeal quite horrible. Meanwhile, some man on crutches approached them with a bloody stump. It was old Lou. The boys asked him if he was all right. The man explained that it had bitten his leg off and he was still alive. The trial had just begun, and already so many people had died. The man asked where the rude guy on the bus was. They answered him that they had not seen him and he must have died too. The director appeared in front of them. She asked the boys why they were all crowded together and asked if they had finished their tasks. The boys saw blood on her and wondered if she had eaten someone too. One of the participants asked if they didn't finish the task. Wouldn't they all be eaten? These tasks are simply impossible to complete. The principal said that even if they don't finish it, it doesn't matter. They are volunteers. They may not be good at their assignments, but their taste must be excellent. The participants couldn't understand how a person could say that about excellent taste. She clearly doesn't look like a human being. The director pointed her finger at the two at the very back and asked what they were up to. The boy said they were just gathering information, not admiring it. The main character told the principal that they were here to look at her. Her beauty fascinated them so much that they couldn't budge, but now it's okay. The pregnant girl wondered if he was really from the government, but he doesn't seem to be picky at all. The principal hummed and told the kid he had a tongue. She's here to remind them if they don't do their assignments or if they get complaints, she'll have to go by the book. It's still 2 hours before dark, so those who haven't completed their assignments yet should hurry up and not keep the old people waiting. The principal told the protagonist that tonight. The kid noticed that she believed his words, but he didn't mean it. He did set some mechanisms in motion, but he doesn't want to be an evil spirit rider. The guys immediately asked the main character how he was not hurt, and whether he had completed his task. The boy replied that he must have been lucky. The guys considered it as a great luck, and it seems that he easily coped with the task. They asked if he noticed anything in the game mechanism to let them know. Old Lou said that after all, they are all human beings who should help each other. The other guy also said that he had saved a pregnant woman and would not just stand by and watch them die. The main character noticed that this guy in the suit is really good at manipulation. Last time, he brought him to the forefront with a few words. The guy asked how he could be so selfish, and it affects them all, after all. Then the protagonist asked him to shut up. He explained to the guys that he hated moral blackmail more than anything and took the pregnant girl's hand. He asked her to go with him since they didn't have any useful leads. But old Lou asked the kid to wait. He may not have any clues, but wouldn't he like to know more about the wishing world? The boy asked if he would be willing to share this information. Old Lou replied that he could tell him about the last time he was in the wishing game, and in return, he would tell him what he had learned. This information will definitely help him fulfill his wish, and he is willing to share it. The man began to explain that it was during that game that he saw the true essence of the world of desire. The guys with bats in their hands started beating him, standing over him like a beast. One of them threatened that, for now, it was just a reminder, but if he didn't pay next time, he would break his leg. His name is Liu Zhanggu. Because of his gambling addiction, he owes a large sum of money at a high interest rate. Collectors often beat him to a pulp. In front of him lay a phone with a heart stabbed with a dagger. Later, he entered the wishing world and passed the tests. And at that time, the thing he wished for most was money, and he needed 1,000,000. When he came back to reality, his wish was immediately fulfilled. 1,000,000 yuan was deposited into his account ending in 0011. If he had any questions, the system asked him to contact him. But his father fell from the construction site where he worked and fell into a coma. He was compensated exactly $1,000,000, and his wish did come true. But the price for that was very high. The price of that million was his father. The man sat clutching his head. He explained that his father was still in the hospital. The man did not let the cigarette out of his hands. He said his wish caused him to fall into a coma. When Liu told this story, he was very upset. Apparently, the wish doesn't just magically come true, but is realized in some crazy way. His wish to get his organs back. That's what the protagonist was thinking. It could mean he's getting organs that have already rotted away. Or there will be an accident and it will take his organs from the person to whom they were transplanted. So, in the end, when he fulfills his wish, he must try to avoid the terrible consequences. Old Liu exclaimed that that was why he was asking for his help. Each of them is responsible for 3 wards. He lost his leg back in the first one, so he's asking for help. The kid thought about the fact that there was no telling if beating the old man would even work. If he told him about this method, he would only die sooner. The protagonist apologized and said that he had already told him he really didn't know anything about the game. He immediately said goodbye to everyone and, taking the pregnant girl by the hand, wished everyone good luck and started to leave. He can only go back to the chamber and ask that old man if he can get any clues. Meanwhile, the old man sat beside his bunk right on the floor and held his head with both hands. The pregnant girl asked if he was not from the government and why he didn't help her then. The protagonist replied that they had ruthlessly thrown her off the bus, and she was protecting them. Isn't life different for government people than it is for regular people? On the other hand, he's just pretending. The pregnant girl said that if she really had to choose who would leave the bus, maybe she would make the same choice as them. After all, she too has a wish to fulfill. Her husband was a firefighter. He died in a rescue mission not long ago. The only child they have is this one. Even though the doctor says he's not growing well and won't survive, she still has to protect him. As long as she coped with the ordeal, all would be well. The girl asked the boy pleadingly. The protagonist replied that everything would be fine, and he didn't expect that this child would turn out to be the offspring of a hero. He asked the old man to come to him and wanted to ask him something. The old man approached the kid and he asked him to choose whether he would calmly confess or resist. Why he attacked him. The kid asked him to write it down on paper. He began to write that the director said it was as if the information on the doors of the wards was left by their children. But this old man says he doesn't like fried meat. The kid decided it was all some kind of trap. The pregnant girl asked him what he meant. The protagonist hesitated and raised a finger in the air and said that he had looked into the lead but couldn't be sure. The girl exclaimed that she understood everything. She uses his clue after all. If it wasn't for him, she would be dead by now. The kid said the information they left on the door was wrong. If you do the opposite, you can avoid danger. The girl replied that she understood him and was going to go and thanked him. The main character thought that if what Liu Jianggu said was true, then even if her baby survives, will it be healthy? She'd better think about what to do at night. The director has an attractive body, but this creature is not human. People can't do what she did, at least they shouldn't. And it's been 2 hours. The kid was thinking about the fact that time was up and he wondered if Yunli was up to the task. The protagonist didn't expect the principal to actually show up. He decided to pretend to be dead. The girl winked at the boy and wondered why he was standing there. She beckoned him to go with his sister. The kid decided that although he could already use the evil spirit card, the principal was much stronger than the old man. Would it be the end of him if he couldn't defeat her? He decided that in order to protect his dignity, he must outsmart her. The kid tells the principal that he really wants it, but he doesn't really have the device. The bad uncles took it. They took his bells. The principal asked if it was a zipper. Then the main character asked where she had seen such a zipper. The director called him a useless creature. The volunteer who was supposed to be in charge of Ward 401 and the old man from there are missing, and she asked to find them before nightfall. The kid asked if he really should leave the room and wasn't she the one who said to stay here after dark? He always takes advice and eats well. He means that he always liked to look for people when he was a kid, and he is a master at it. The director asked him not to worry and said that as long as he was looking for them, she would not leave him without thanks. When she said those words, she walked forward down the hall. The reward is so important, but she just wants to ease his burden. The protagonist mumbled that, if she remembered correctly, room number 401 was supposed to be handled by the girl in the white socks who'd been sitting next to him on the bus. He hadn't seen her in the lobby tonight. Does the director want him to find people or help with the corpses? In martial arts, speed is the one thing you can't beat. In that case, all he can do is move toward his goal, no matter what. The order to the fighters was to advance immediately. He asked the Almighty to hurry to move the law somehow. The footsteps here are too loud, and what if it attracts someone crazy? He's wearing sneakers and his footsteps should be practically inaudible. It's coming from the second floor. Could be heels. The kid started to listen and actually heard the sound of heels approaching him. The monster girl was behind him and said that now he was caught. The protagonist thinks it's a ghost, but as a man who has no organs, he should not be frightened by it. The kid's look changed and he thought he needed to plan how to escape. He looked at the ghost and said he was afraid of ghosts, but they had never heard him yet. He began to move on and the ghost began to speak to him. It was like some kind of melody. The ghost girl explained that she wasn't afraid of people, but they hurt her badly. When he started to climb the stairs, she called out to him and asked him to wait. He walked on, but she asked him to wait for her again and grabbed his shoulder with her ghostly hand. The protagonist wondered what she wanted to do about getting on his back with that look in her eyes. There was no way he was going to let that happen. He shouldn't just wait for his death. He'll have to pull out his big poof to scare her off. He asked the demon how dare she show off in front of a true professional and call her a great celestial dragon. The boy exclaimed that she would pay for it. But why can't he move his arm? When the kid caught his hand, he realized his hand was numb from the cold. The ghost girl came closer to him and wondered what he had just said. But she laughed and said that he must have heard her. The ghost asked him to wait for her, as she was almost done connecting. The protagonist replied that he was waiting for her and said his hand was numb. He can't use the card, but he can still run. If he can't defeat them, he must outsmart them. If he can't outsmart that, he needs to run. The cold sensation in his hand has already passed. The protagonist wondered if perhaps he had lost her. He glanced away and snorted. He looked at the staircase he was climbing and noticed that it was divided. The ghost girl asked him to wait for her and said she was almost done connecting. The boy noticed that when he first went up to the 3rd floor, only footsteps were heard. But as he got closer to the 4th floor, a tongue and a hand appeared. Looks like her body parts are scattered all over the hallway. and she's picking them up piece by piece. So she asked him to wait, and once she put it back together, he's finished. The kid clutched at his heart, which is not there, and said it was very poor and he was all expectant. As he moved down the hallway, he noticed that there was no blood anywhere around. And that was a very good thing. Things seemed to be better here than on the second floor. He found himself in front of room 401. It said her father has Alzheimer's and likes to play hide and seek. He always hides behind the curtains if someone starts playing with him. He never gets tired of it. But playing hide and seek with him is very dangerous. The protagonist thinks about it, and considering what he has learned before, the information should be taken exactly the opposite. To complete the task in this ward, you need to play hide and seek with this old man. The boy opened the door and said hello. He said hello in different languages and asked if anyone was here. They said he's hiding behind the curtains, but they're not even hanging. Where would he look for him? The protagonist began to look around the entire room, looking around. He looked out of the room and heard some noise. The boy hummed and looked out the door. He noticed a girl running towards him as fast as she could. She kept screaming. The girl who was sitting next to him on the bus asked her brother to help her and save her. She ran up to the kid and started hugging him. The protagonist replied that since she was fine, he asked her to start by telling him what happened here, where the old man she's responsible for went. The girl explained with tears in her eyes that he had decided to play hide and seek with her, but the instructions on the door said it was dangerous to play with him. Playing hide and seek with him is the solution, but why is this girl so scared? The protagonist wondered if his hunch was wrong. Then maybe Yoon Lee is in danger now. He wondered what happened next. Meanwhile, a few hours ago, the girl was walking down the hallway and asked the old man if he had a good hiding place. She heard suddenly some noise behind her back and she threw a glance there. Near the curtain, she spotted the old man and said that it turns out he was here and she found him. But when she found him, he wanted to play again. The old man was very creepy and wouldn't look at her. The girl explained that the second time she found, and lo and behold, he was still hiding behind the curtain. He continued to stand behind that curtain without moving, and there were several couples there. The protagonist asked what she was talking about. Then the girl explained that the third time, there were already 3 people standing there. With every game, another person appeared behind the curtain, and it was quite creepy. There was no room left there now. Behind the curtain was a whole troop of old men. The frightened girl clung to her brother and asked if she could be his girlfriend. He came here to find her. He must really like her. And now that she's his girlfriend, he can't ignore her. The kid replied so she doesn't misunderstand him, and he's here on the principal's assignment. He's not going to be a hero and save a young girl in trouble. He's going to check what's going on there, and she shouldn't stand there but keep her eyes open. The girl started yelling that he was her boyfriend and had an obligation to save her, even if it meant he would die. The protagonist asked what that merciless push was, asked her to forgive her. She didn't mean to hurt him, but she doesn't want to die. The kid thought about the fact that even a pregnant woman wasn't afraid to complete the task, and this girl just wants him to pass the test for her. As expected, women only slow down the rate at which guns are drawn. The kid got as close as he could to the curtains and tried to pull them apart. He had already started to pull back the curtain. When he saw the old man in front of him, he immediately said hello. The people in front of him were not old men, but some creepy monsters with red glowing eyes. There were a great many of them, and they looked at him with their eerie gaze. One of them exclaimed that he had found him. The protagonist couldn't realize how many souls he had eaten. He mumbled that it was his turn to look for it. He started yelling that he had found him. The protagonist realized that they were only attacking the young and raised up his fist, which glowed with a golden light. The old man monster saw that the kid started to unite the golden spirit armor. The kid was confident that he could handle 10 at once and clenched his fists as hard as he could. But the old monster man started laughing and talking about finding him again. The boy asked the old man in return to find his mother better. He began to attack his opponent. But the monster old men began to approach him faster and faster, extending their arms forward. They couldn't stop talking about finding him and approaching the protagonist. The lad exclaimed that he would fight and would not let himself be harmed in any way. He put his hand forward and it was red in color. He reached for his opponents. The monsters approached faster and faster towards him, and their eyes glittered with anger and nightmare, as one of the monsters had already reached out and stabbed the kid right in the body. The protagonist exclaimed that what he hates most is being holy. His insides were torn. He mumbled, reaching forward to say that they really deserved to die. The monsters kept approaching the kid and talking about how they had found him. The old man kept saying what he had found. Everything around him glowed with a bright red, bloody light. Those reflections flashed around, and the old men were already falling to the floor, exhausted from the kid's strength. The protagonist was already exhausted too, with trickles of sweat running down his face. He called them a bunch of little bullies. The old monsters fell to the floor, and bright streams of fire came out of the protagonist's hands. He talked about how it was a bit weak for a real man too, but at least he was able to get rid of all of them before the card expired. He gave his opponent a good kick, and the monster's muzzle was completely on fire. They began to approach the kid again. One of the monsters exclaimed that he had found him. The protagonist called it cheating. He wanted to file a complaint against them. Do they even see it? The moon is so beautiful tonight, why don't they stop fighting? Suddenly a thought occurred to the boy, and he looked toward the moon. The old man had gone crazy and attacked him when the blood moon rose in the sky. After dark, the director asked him to stay in the room and not to go out. She told the participants not to sleep too soundly at night. He realized that she had said that on purpose. At least it is this strange moonlight glow that is the danger. There are no curtains in these chambers. If they really follow the headmaster's advice and hide in the wards, the old men in them will go crazy, and being under the hypnosis of the blood moon will attack. This creep doesn't care about people at all, and just wants to feed them to these old people. The protagonist exclaimed, looking at his opponents, that there is only one truth. He began to approach them to make a deceptive maneuver, and they began to look at the moon. He got his way, and when he looked at the monsters, he saw molten bodies in front of him. An old man appeared in front of him, smiling contentedly. He said that it was expected. The protagonist asked the old man better rest well. Until tomorrow he promised to play hide-and-seek again, because it is already late today. He went up to the old man, and looking into his eyes smiled and said that it was very late. He asked him to have a good rest, and to play hide-and-seek with him tomorrow. The old man replied that he could not lie to him. The boy exclaimed that this was just wonderful and asked me to wait for him here and be a good boy. He started to run as fast as he could away from the old man and went into the ward. He lifted the sheet and noticed that the missing old man from room 401 had been found. And now he could finally explain everything to the director. Since the blood moon hasn't disappeared yet, if he goes out now, there's a risk of running into danger. Just in case, it's best to wait it out here until he can use his card again. Meanwhile, the girl was lying on the stairs, asking the kid for help. He's her boyfriend, and he has to save her. The protagonist exclaimed that it was her. The ghost was already above the head of the lying girl. Not that he really wanted to help, he can't use the card right now, and so he apologized that there's nothing he can do in this case. Besides, she had decided to run off on her own, and now 3 hours have passed. The protagonist looked ahead and hummed, "If this was all that was left of the sister in the white socks." The kid looked at the bloody steps and begged the Lord for mercy. It's not like she was taken by her big sister in the hallway to pick herself up piece by piece. He should rely on his own luck. In the meantime, the boy came to room number 203. He said he was back and started to enter the room. He noticed that the elderly people in the nursing home were becoming insane under the influence of the blood moon. It doesn't affect the ones who've been beaten up. What a day. He asked the old man to write down what he wanted to eat tomorrow, so that he wouldn't be picky and get another beating from him. The old man wrote on the paper that he wanted raw meat. The protagonist promised to give him a huge plate of gut sashimi tomorrow. Nunir wondered how he had come to eat like that in the first place. The old man wrote on the paper that, to be honest, he doesn't like raw meat, but his son likes it. The boy asked the old man if he had purposely left all that meat to save for his son. It's all rotted away. The old man wrote again on the paper that he didn't know when he would be back. The protagonist thought about those words. Clearly something is wrong here and he needs to be more careful. He is waiting for his son without even realizing that he is the one who left him to die in this strange nursing home. So the meat that this old man leaves for him lay there day after day getting a terrible rotten smell. Being torn between love, hate, and obsession is very cruel. Is this really the world of desire? The first night in the Bloody Corner nursing home is over. Meanwhile, the trial participants gathered outside under a glowing lantern. The guys noticed that there were far fewer people dead last night than the first night. The contestants were all standing in one circle, or rather, those who were still alive after the second trial. The main character walked up to the pregnant girl and thought to himself, "Thank God she's alive." The girl walked over to the kid and immediately thanked him. If it wasn't for his clues, she would have been dead. The boy replied that everything was fine and it was just a guess. So if it worked, the girl thought she could tell others about it. The protagonist explained that she had tested the hunch herself during her assignment. If she wants to share with them, she doesn't need to ask his permission. Suddenly, red heels appeared in front of them. It was the principal herself. She walked up to the guys and exclaimed that there were still so many of them, and that's not bad at all. She threw some kind of card in the air with an inscription on it. The principal explained, looking at the boys, that these were their assignments for the day, and she hoped to see them again. The girl had a sly and devious look in her eyes and smiled and licked her lips with her tongue. The director suddenly stopped and asked the main character Wang Ming to come over to her. She said that even though the volunteer in charge of the 401st Ward died yesterday, he managed to find the old man. He had done well, and so she was giving him a reward for his work. The girl handed him some kind of pouch. Wang Ming replied to the principal that he was honored to take on some of her burden, and laughed. The principal then inquired if he was telling the truth and promised to come again tonight. The protagonist wondered why God was so hard on him. There was money in the bag. The boy was surprised that there was money in this world too. Old Lu said it's a currency in the wishing world. Last time he was here, he saw others using them. They're called wish coins. Wang Ming asked him about the wish coins. After all, the name was too beautiful for money from the underworld. The old man asked me not to underestimate them. The players who participated in the trials killed each other to get 10 of these coins, and 3 of them ended up dying. What did he do last night, and why did the principal give him so much money? The protagonist explained that she simply asked to go to the 4th floor and help her find the missing old man and the volunteer from room 401. The old man asked if it was a secret mission, going to the 4th floor at night and alone. How could he have the guts to know if that meant he knew something about the game? Old Lu asked everyone to be quiet because Brother Wang Ming had shared some information about the Wish World with him yesterday. But if that's not enough, he has something else. He'll tell in return for the clue he found. The boy thought about how he knew he really knew something. He inquired of the man what he would say. Then Lu asked if he was right everyone here was from Linhai. In other words, they all came to this damn place from him. Wish World is mostly chosen by people by region. The guys immediately thought about it. The pregnant girl listened very carefully to the man really agreeing with him. She said they were all from Linhai, and she asked one of the boys if his father had accidentally been injured in the fire at the central shopping center. The boy asked her how she knew about it. The girl explained that her husband's name was Qin Hong. The boy replied that he had died and called him Captain. Wang Ming approached this boy and said that he had a family of heroes and so he would be fine too. Old Lu gave the kid his number and said that if he told him about the clue, he would send him 100,000 yuan when they got out of here. The guys immediately started upping the ante and offering him even more money just so he would save them and help them get out of here. The protagonist thought about the fact that he originally wanted Yun Li to tell them about the clue, but there was no way he expected this turn of events. Wang Ming hummed and asked them to forget about it. Since they were so sincere in asking him, he would tell them. He started talking, and after sharing the clue with everyone, he went to a new room. He went to room number 204. Today's assignment was to clean this ward. It was written on the door that the mother has Alzheimer's and forgets everything, even to go to the toilet. Despite her crazy character, she is completely harmless, so volunteers should not be afraid. The protagonist went to the door and began to slowly open the door but saw no one inside. Suddenly, a female monster appeared in front of him and started asking where her daughter was. She wanted to see her very badly and asked the guy to bring her daughter. The kid asked the woman to calm down for starters. This old woman is too strong for her age. If she keeps this up, his neck is dead. The monster woman kept saying she wanted to see her daughter or he would die. The protagonist didn't expect her to attack as soon as he walked in. He thought about her forgetting everything and even going to the bathroom. Then what does she remember? The kid started calling himself her precious daughter and said she had come to see her. The old woman immediately changed and asked Xiaofang whether Xiaofang was in front of her right now. Wang Ming replied to the mommy that it was indeed her and asked if she had forgotten her. The woman responded by asking how she could. How can a mom not recognize her daughter and asked her not to cry? But she remembers her breasts were bigger. The kid replied to the woman that she wouldn't understand and it's so fashionable now. Not only does he wear beautiful clothes, it also symbolizes world peace. Men who like big breasts are perverts. He asked his mother to go inside the house for starters and said then he was very hurt because she was too fierce. The woman put her head down and mumbled that it was all her fault. She thought it was the hospital assistants. The protagonist wondered what kind of helpers she was talking about. Aren't they the participants of the trial helpers? Wang Ming asked his mom what was wrong with the hospital aides. The boy said he thought they were pretty good people, but the woman exclaimed that they had deceived him. Wang Ming inquired what she was talking about and what they had deceived him about. The woman explained that the hospital aides often beat people up and they didn't feed her. They also inject something into some of the old people here, and then they all die. The protagonist thought about her words again. So the older people here believe that it is the helpers who are the danger. I think he had just learned something important. The woman asked her daughter if she would take her mom home. She promised not to wet her pants anymore. Wang Ming replied that of course he would take her home as soon as he finished here. He asked for permission to help clean the room first. The woman said that she knew her daughter was so understanding. The bloody nursing home in which the second night came. Wang Ming turned to the director and asked if she had come and what this time. He would do anything for her. The girl explained that a shipment of goods had arrived and asked him to go to the exit and carry them from there to the 5th floor. She remembered that no matter what happened, one should not open the boxes. The protagonist listened to her and wondered. She had said that she would come again tonight, and that was the only reason. Suddenly becoming such an icebox not unlike her, the principal wondered what those helpers were up to, and how come none of them died tonight, which was weird enough for her. Meanwhile, there was a huge truck outside, and a guy was carrying a big box out of it. He pulled out a few more boxes and was approached by the main character. The kid approached the car and asked the guy if he worked here. He explained that he didn't recognize him. Then the man answered nothing and closed the door in the car. Wang Ming asked again what he was doing. The man looked at him with a sad look and replied that he couldn't tell him that. Then the kid came closer to him and asked him not to misunderstand him, and he knows he's the driver. He just wanted to ask what was in those boxes. He tries to walk away, leaving him with nothing, and he can't let that happen. He asked his buddy if he wanted a cigarette and asked him to take his time. The driver was immediately interested and asked where the cigarettes were. Wang Ming pointed to his pocket and asked him not to stand still, but to give him one. The man got angry and began to change his face. He asked why the boy had cheated him. Does he really want to die right now? But the money bill flew right into his eyes. Wang Ming decided that he would not let this driver just slip away from him. That's when the driver approached the kid and said it was a misunderstanding. The protagonist laughed and said that the saying money can make even the devil spin the millstones for them has not died out. The driver immediately started offering the kid a cigarette. But the protagonist replied that he did not smoke, but just wanted to ask him something. The man asked if he wanted to know what was inside those boxes. Wang Ming said yes and asked how he knew about it. The man explained that he had told himself, and it turns out noble people often forget some things. There wasn't really anything special in there, just some solutions, mostly sedatives. The boy asked what it was for. Then the man asked if there weren't any naughty old people here. One injection, and they all become good-looking. The protagonist thought to himself that this was the drug that the ant from Ward 204 was talking about. If you inject it into a person, he'll die. At that time, the principal asked for something to pick up, namely these boxes. Does she really want them to kill someone? He told his buddy that he hadn't seen him here before and asked if he was new. The driver remarked that he comes here at night to pick up goods, and isn't he afraid of running into that thing? Wang Ming asked what kind of thing he was talking about. But the driver apologized and said that he was talking too much and that it was classified information. The boy showed him some money bills again. He mumbled, looking into his eyes, that he didn't hear what he had just told him. The driver replied that he only said that even though the information was secret, they were buddies and he would tell everything he knew. Once upon a time there lived a little girl who was characterized by a special caring nature. In order to earn money and take care of her sick mother, she did not hesitate to give up a bright future, choosing to work in this nursing home as an assistant. At first, everything was going well, but suddenly one day her mother suddenly disappeared. When she was found, her body had been mutilated and thrown into a trash can in the hallway. It was horrible on every floor, and that girl went crazy and threw herself off the roof. The protagonist realized that the ghost in the hallway was that girl's mother. He asked the man what happened then, whether they had found the culprit. The man replied that he was a simple delivery man, and such things were really unknown to him. He told his buddy, shaking his hand, that he needed to hurry up and deliver more goods whether he understood him or not. Wang Ming replied that of course he understood. The man explained that he couldn't just take his money away, so let him remember to light it when he went up the stairs. It warmed his heart because there were still so many good ghosts in the world. He had just escaped from the second floor, and luckily hadn't run into anything. Now, while the blood moon was still out, going up from the 1st to the 5th floor, he was likely to meet that mutilated lady. Just in case, the protagonist first decided to light the candle the dude gave him. He lit a candle and began to walk up the stairs very quickly, after which his walking turned into running. He ran faster and faster and tried not to turn around. He heard the ghost's voice again. A ghost dragged behind him and asked him to wait. Wang Ming realized that the ghost really couldn't come closer because of the candle. He asked Auntie if she was here today and said he had waited a long time for this moment. He asked the mighty dragon power to retreat. The ghost woman began to slowly walk away. The protagonist exclaimed, clasping the candle in his hand, that it was just beautiful and broke out in a satisfied smile. The ghost kept talking about how she was almost done picking them up. The kid was already approaching the trash can. He saw another body part and realized that it seemed his brother hadn't lied to him. Wang Ming walked over to this trash can and started to open the lid. He realized it was her. In front of us is a nursing home, specifically a hallway and the 4th floor. The boy was already on the floor near the garbage can. When he looked in that tank, he saw the remains of a woman's body. No wonder he didn't see her last night. The protagonist realized that the contestant had been dismembered and thrown into this dumpster last night. He had a candle in his hand, and the boy was thinking that when desire takes hold of you, death seems like a release. In front of him was room 501. The 5th floor is the top floor of the nursing home. There's only one room on it. No information on the door from relatives, and the director has not assigned this ward to anyone. The protagonist wondered if perhaps her secrets were hidden inside and reached for the doorknob with her hand. As he tried to go inside, the principal appeared in front of him and asked what he was doing here. The boy replied to the girl that it was no big deal. He brought what she asked for. Wang Ming asked where to take the boxes. The director asked him to put them in the hall. And here before us was the lobby, which was on the 5th floor. The boy was already bringing the box to the right place. The principal asked him to leave it there and said it was his payment for today. The boy exclaimed, looking at the girl, that she was very kind to him. She was just holding out the bills to him, and her look completely changed. Wang Ming looked at her, smiling. She smiled back at him very creepily and remembered there was something else she wanted to say. If he sets foot on the 5th floor, he'll never get out of here either. The protagonist couldn't understand what was going on. Killing a donkey after he's finished a job? Isn't that a mockery of an honest man? The principal turned into a monster and began to fly towards him to strike. She wanted to kill him now and directed all her power towards the kid. He dodged just in time and exclaimed that it was very close. That broad is strong as hell. One punch from her is like 20 years of strength. The power of the evil spirit alone would not be enough to defeat this woman. All he can do is try to attack. The female monster has already approached him. She clenched her teeth and began to glare angrily at the boy. But when she got closer, she saw no one in front of her. The principal wondered where he had gone. The protagonist really wasn't in front of her. Wang Ming realized that he couldn't win and only an idiot would fight her face to face. There's only one way to win. You have to close the curtains and stop the ghost from turning into a ghost. When the kid ran out into the hallway, he couldn't figure out where the curtains were, and trickles of sweat started running down his face. The ghost girl was behind him, and she was talking about how she knew how he was trying his best, but what was the point? He must be so frustrated, tired, and totally depressed right now. The protagonist threw a scornful glance at her. He tried to act on the plan he had devised. She asked for permission to end his miserable and pain-filled life. The monster was already approaching him and raised her hand to attack the kid. Suddenly, the main character asked what they were all standing there for and asked her to kill her. With this maneuver, he drew the monster away and tried to hit her with his fist as hard as he could. He couldn't realize what he was doing right now. The evil spirit card would expire in a minute, and he would really die here. He threw the monster far back against the wall, but she began to approach her victim again as quickly as possible. The monster girl shouted that there was no way for him to escape. Wang Ming thought about the fact that there was another one in the corridor. If he got between them, he would be finished. The monster was coming at him faster and faster, and the kid looked at door number 501. He decided it was his only chance and kicked that door open. He had an idea. He wanted to see what was hidden in room 501. The girl was very frightened. She exclaimed, approaching the kid, that he couldn't go in there, and under no circumstances should he do so. But the protagonist immediately said goodbye to her and went inside, slamming the door shut. No sooner had he locked the door behind him than the evil spirit's card expired. The kid decided he'd had enough and couldn't go on. He could barely catch his breath. That's when he looked up. The protagonist decided that it was when the principal was still an assistant. The girl sat in the corner, very upset, and held her hands on her head. This girl was crying very hard and was in a ward where an unconscious man was lying. It was her mom, and she was in a coma. It took a long time for the woman to regain consciousness. The daughter snuggled up to her mother, who was unconscious, and talked about apologizing to her that she couldn't go on like this. Meanwhile, the girl stood in the middle of the room and asked the man for something. She told him that she promised to pay him back in a few days. The girl asked to borrow money. The man pushed her away and told her to get the hell out of here. The girl fell face down. She begged many people to help and even borrowed money from moneylenders. She held her head with both hands and couldn't stop crying. She told her mother that there was no cure for her illness. Now she's just a bottomless pit. The girl, after crying for a very long time, went over to the bunk again and pulled the sheet up. She called the woman her mom again and lifted her pillow up and asked her to forgive her. She put this pillow against her mother's face and began to smother her harder and harder. The girl smothered her mother with a pillow, for which she repented very much later. Turns out the principal the driver was talking about was this girl, and her mom's killer was her. The protagonist began to put all the events into one chain. He thought about the ladder and the tank with the dismembered corpse. The ghost woman in the hallway is her mother. Getting rid of her mother's dismembered body is kind of hard. Wang Ming pondered 100 times and still didn't understand anything. Perhaps in the world of desire, everything strange and unbelievable is the norm. And here we have a bloody nursing home in front of us. It's night 2 in there. The lobby of the first floor of the nursing home. The guys were talking about how calm everything was. Old Lou said that he could tell from experience that this ordeal would soon be over. A pregnant girl stood behind him and asked if he was telling the truth. Lou explained that the director had said that each of them was responsible for 3 teams. Judging by the progress of the assignment, their task of caring for the elderly was complete. One of the boys asked if he could finally get out of here. The other asked Brother Lou if God would be able to fulfill their wishes after the task was completed. The old man replied that he could. By completing the task, they will realize the wish. But they must realize that to hear God, a price must be paid. The boys were very excited because they could go home. One of them told his father that he would be there soon and asked him to hang on. The mission would end after this night. But was it really that simple? The director was already approaching the guys. The blood moon receded and the principal got all weird. She said none of them had died last night and that was just fine. Today she will give them one last assignment. The nursing home caters to elderly clients and their relatives, so they're having visitors early tomorrow morning. Before they arrive, the old people must be sedated to make them quiet and docile. These are the numbers of the rooms they will be looking after. They must remember that once tomorrow's visit comes to an end, their mission will be accomplished. If they fail and cause resentment, it will be an unforgivable mistake. Old Lou came up to the protagonist and said he had business to attend to. The kid asked what kind of business. The old man began to explain that there were about 50 people in the first trials, and how many he thought would be left at the end. When the lad hesitated, the old fellow showed on his fingers that only 3 would remain. Then the main character asked him if he wanted to say that there were too many survivors now. The old man replied that yes. There are few survivors in the world of desire. Killing is the norm. There are so many people left, it is simply unrealistic. Tomorrow is the end of the trial, or maybe the end of their lives. Wang Ming explained that he had something. The director asked him to bring this box last night, and he suspects that something is wrong with these injections. Old Lou was very surprised that she asked him again. He asked if he liked her. The kid laughed and asked her to believe him. He would hate to fulfill this whim of hers. The grandmother he looks after told him last night that those syringes would kill them. Lou mumbled back that he'd said this mission wouldn't be so easy, and it turns out it's a trap. If these old people die, their children won't leave them so easily, and you can't give these injections. That information is unverified, and he can't guarantee anything. Besides, judging by the way the director is acting now, if they don't get the shots, she'll kill them herself. Wang Ming told old Lou that he is an experienced player and he believes him. He can tell others about it, and it's up to them to believe it or not. The old man immediately thanked him for it and walked towards the rest of the participants. Different tickets with room numbers were flying around, and the main character caught one of them. He hoped the evening would go smoothly for everyone. It was written on the paper that Dad was mentally ill and that he had to be looked after every day, or he might hurt himself or others. He is his only son, and if his illness is incurable, he asked to be told about it. One must remember never to take his harness off him. Wang Ming walked into the ward of a mentally ill man. He immediately began to ask to be untied. He wouldn't stop talking about being hurt and saying he deserved to die. The crazy old man kept yelling, looking at the kid, that he deserved to die just as much as he did. The old man turned into a monster, and a very creepy blue-colored tongue started coming out of his mouth. Wang Ming grabbed one of the ropes and started pulling it up. The old man was very surprised by this. The protagonist wondered what the rush was. Didn't he help him get out? He kept asking if that's what it was all about, and why he couldn't leave this guy alone. But the old man kept sticking his ugly tongue out of his fanged mouth and approaching the kid. Wang Ming asked the monster not to do anything stupid. He tried to stop his opponent. The old man started pointing to the kid on the floor. He tried to explain that the main character was standing on his tongue. Then the kid laughed and replied that he did it by accident. The old man asked him to put his tongue back in a little slower. And so a few more minutes passed. The old man explained to the boy that he was normal and not sick at all. He asked if Wang Ming believed him. Deep down in his heart, he thinks he's sick. The protagonist replied to the old man that it was all untrue and slanderous. He doesn't even have a heart. The patient then inquired how a person can't have a heart, or is he crazy? Wang Ming replied to the old man that if he didn't believe it, he could see for himself, and lifted his shirt up, revealing his torso. The old man told the dude it was probably a zipper, but the kid explained that it was a stitch. The old man immediately felt sorry for him, because he was so young, and he was obviously having a hard time. Wang Ming decided that now that he was not so negative towards him, he should lure out more information. He told the old man that since he had seen his stitches, they were now friends. The kid asked his dear friend who he meant when he said he deserved to die like him. The old man immediately grabbed his head with his hands and called him a damned kid. He kept talking about how he had to kill him. Then the protagonist asked the man he was talking about if he was his son. But the old man could not calm down and kept saying only one thing, that he should kill him. The kid listened to him, trying to figure out why he was immediately angry and couldn't calm down at this point. He began to shout at the old man that his son had been dead for a long time. Then the enemy showed his claws and fangs and began to approach the boy. The protagonist realized that the son was the solution to the problem. He asked if he wanted to kill him and was told that there was no need since he was already dead. The old man stuck out his creepy blue tongue and asked how. Wang Ming mumbled again that he was already gone and that there was no need for such questions. The old man calmed down again and said he was right. The boy thought he was moving in the right direction. He asked the old man why he wanted his son to die so badly. If he is not mistaken, he has only one son. That year, his mother became seriously ill, and the doctor said he could save her, but needed a lot of money. The old man went on to explain that he wanted to sell the house and give her a life, but the son refused to sell it. He and his wife worked hard to save money to buy him a house. In the end, it was more important to him than his own mother's life. The old man became angry again and clenched his teeth and called him a freak. He raised his two fists up and clenched them very tightly. The old man exclaimed that the rascal was finally dead. He was so happy and laughed immediately. The protagonist decided that it looked like his lies had gone too far. The old man kept laughing. He smiled and walked over to the kid and asked if it was the week of the relative's visit tomorrow. Wang Ming replied to the old man that this was indeed the case and asked why he was asking. The old man exclaimed that he was a good man and it was time to say goodbye. The boy asked him what he was talking about. Then the old man explained that every time relatives come, they change, and there are fewer old people. The place used to be so lively, but now it was completely empty. The boy listened attentively to him. Meanwhile, there was already a full moon outside. It was the third night in the nursing home, and it was coming to an end. The next day in the lobby of the nursing home, the girl exclaimed to her mother that she had come to check on her. The son asked his father if he missed him. The girl asked the nurse which room her mother was in. The visitors headed toward the room. They heard some strange exclamations and turned their heads toward the door. The girl asked what was wrong. She asked if her mother was dead. The boy replied that he didn't know because everything was normal yesterday. The boy exclaimed that his father had died too. That's how they take care of them in that nursing home of theirs. The visitors started calling them heartless and saying that they would pay for their lives. They must surely die. That was the command given to the monsters just now, and they began to change their faces. Cries for help could be heard all around. The director exclaimed that you are born the way you are and you will die the way you die. Everyone would eventually turn to dust. She couldn't stop laughing, and then the carnage begins. In the nursing home, the monsters were already running rampant in the first-floor hallway. The visitors screamed for help harder and harder. The atmosphere was very horrible and intimidating. The second-floor corridor of the nursing home was also full of people. The pregnant girl asked to stay away. She was standing near the steps where the ghost monster was climbing, a very creepy and insidious monster. The main character showed up very timely and asked the girl how she was. The girl replied that she was fine. She began to ask what had even happened and where so many monsters had come from. The kid grabbed her arm and dragged her more like that horrible place. He explained that we had to get out of here first, and as soon as possible, as it was very dangerous. Looks like a randomized massacre. Whether you get the shot or not, you're gonna die. There had to be one right option out of those two. There were many monsters chasing them. The pregnant girl asked not to worry about her and told the kid to save himself. Her powers are limited and she won't be able to save everyone, but his could. Wang Ming continued to fight the ghosts and protect her. He could not leave a weak pregnant woman in danger and began to fight back against the monsters. He put out his fist and struck one of them, knocking him over with all his might. The protagonist noticed, clenching his fist, that the evil spirit's power had somehow increased. But something was wrong and the evil spirit was consuming him. The boy glowed with a bright fiery light. If he were to release the evil spirit power now, these monsters would tear him apart. So he's been waiting all this time for the right moment to attack. Then he decided to see who was who. He controls him or the enemy absorbs him. The monster was already above the kid's head and was coming faster and faster towards him. The guy started pulling his hand towards the protagonist and spoke of the king's order. Old Lou was talking about the injections. He wanted to explain that it wasn't the principal who bought them. The protagonist looked closely at the guys who are participating in this creepy game. If the director didn't buy those injections, then who did? It was him or them. The injections were bought by these kids and they all wished their elderly parents a speedy death. The pregnant girl started apologizing and telling the main character that it was all because of her. But the kid calmed her down and replied that it wasn't her fault. From the very beginning, they were doomed to die. But he's come up with one option that's very crazy, but it's their only chance of getting out of here. Wang Ming grabbed the pregnant girl's hand and dragged her away from those creepy monsters that were running after them. The countdown for the Golden Spirit ticket has begun, and here at the door of room number 203. The countdown was underway, and the kid kicked the door with his foot, and they began to walk inside. Just as the evil spirit ticket was about to expire, he thought that they would be able to remove the evil spirit ticket here. The protagonist asked who the children of the occupant of room number 203 were. He asked to see for himself. He always left raw meat for him because he loves it, and his son didn't even have the courage to visit him. He left him alone to rot with the food. It wasn't him who took bad care of him, it was the son. It wasn't him who wanted him dead, it was the one he raised. The son asked, even if it's true, what does that prove? He said he was saving it for him, but what kind of food was it? It's all rotten and stale. He even hides it in his pockets. Isn't that disgusting? The visitor kept asking the protagonist. Wang Ming wondered how dare he say it was disgusting and asked him to watch it himself. He threw a scribbled piece of paper at him and said it was actually disgusting. This grandfather's son began to read the paper and streams of sweat ran down his face. He likes raw meat best of all. Father wrote this on a piece of paper every day. The boy started to remember what it was like when he was a kid. How his parents used to cook him raw meat. When he went into the kitchen, he would ask his father what it was and why it smelled so bad. He used to say when he grew up that if he was such a slob, he would send him to a nursing home. He doesn't know what the shelf life of the food is, but he knows it wasn't rotten or dirty to begin with. The main character was explaining it to the son, who left his father here in the nursing home. He went on to talk about how it was just that during all this time he had never once come to visit him. The kid's gaze was wan and displayed despair and pity for his father. Then the son went up to the old man and apologized to his father for not coming to see him. He reached out to his father and tearfully told him he would take him home. The old man got very excited and squeezed his son's hand with a smile on his face. He finally smiled for the first time in a while and his happiness was unbounded. The main character was standing next to a pregnant girl. They raised their gazes upwards. They couldn't understand what was happening. They missed one thing, and that's the assignment is called Crying Sunset. Sunset is a metaphor for these old men, and a sunset shouldn't cry. At that moment, the monster stopped attacking as if expecting some kind of redemption. In front of us is room 204. The main character said to the girl who complained that she forgets everything and can't even go to the toilet without help. Grandma kept asking if it was her. But the funny thing is that she only remembers one thing, and that is her name of the person who wanted to leave her. Wang Ming reached out to this girl as well. She tearfully apologized to her mother. The protagonist began to move further down the hallway to help everyone else. Suddenly, some guy grabbed him by the arm and said he knew the kid was trying to push his feelings. But his father always wanted to kill him because he missed the chance to save his mother for money. The guy tried to tell the main character that he wouldn't forgive him even after death. But Wang Ming looked him in the eye and explained that he was wrong and he was not craving his forgiveness but his own. Then the guy got even angrier and asked how he could forgive himself, and it's ridiculous. He said he wouldn't go into that room, but he would stay here until the boy came out to wring his neck with his own hands. Then he agreed and told him to wait for him at the door, after which he went into the room. When he entered the room, the old man asked if he was leaving. The boy replied that he was indeed leaving. But before he does, there's something he has to tell him. Before he lied to him, his son wasn't dead. The old man's eyes changed and glistened with tears. He said the boy had tricked him with this and he must be angry. But for some reason he doesn't want to kill him at all. The man closed his eyes and beaded with sweat. Wang Ming hugged the old man and explained to him that although his son wasn't dead, he didn't have long to live. The old man was interested in what he meant. The protagonist replied that he was sick and needed a heart transplant, but the hospital can't provide it. The old man's look changed instantly. He immediately asked if his heart would be suitable for transplant. He was willing to share his heart for the sake of his son, but the protagonist asked if he didn't want to kill him. He gave up his own mother for the apartment and killed his wife. The old man laughed and said that in fact his mother had then insisted on refusing treatment, not wanting to burden the child with her illness. He's the one who kept it from her and forced the kid to sell the house. He just didn't expect him to say no so firmly. The head doctor won't let him leave this place, so he asks him to give his heart to his son. Before he could say anything, the door started to open, and a guy appeared on the threshold of the room. He opened the door and immediately fell to his knees in front of his father, regretting everything. The guy started apologizing and told his dad that he was wrong and it was all his fault. The old man asked if he was all right. The father listened attentively to his son. He said, "If he's okay, that's great. In the meantime, let's go to the first floor lobby." Yun Li then dispersed the 3 rooms he was responsible for in the same manner. However, the key information came too late. When Wang Ming and his team returned to the hall on the first floor, the other participants were already lying in a pool of blood. The protagonist said that it looked like they had passed the test. The pregnant girl replied that it looked like they had. And the kid asked Yun Li if she knew what was at the end of this ordeal. She didn't know and inquired what exactly it was. Wang Ming replied that a verbal duel. The girl asked him to leave his contact and asked, how about she treats him to dinner after she gets out of here? The boy replied to his sister that she had talked about food and he was really hungry, and then he laughed. But no sooner had they finished talking than a monster appeared in front of them. The vicious monster opened its ghastly maw and huge fangs gleamed in front of them. The monster exclaimed that no one would leave here alive and began to approach her opponents. Yunli asked the kid what they should do now. Wang Ming realized that the cursed ticket to the spirit world was still on recharge. The monster began to approach the kid, and with a cry of "Die!" raised her paw as high as she could. The protagonist started to pull some sort of bundle from behind his sinus and tried to fend off the attack. He swung that bundle as hard as he could and everything around him lit up with bright red lightning. That bottle hit the monster right in the face and trickles of blood began to run down its face. The bottle fell with a clatter to the floor and rolled across the cracked floor. The monster girl was still alive. Wang Ming explained to the pregnant woman that he found this under the bed in room 501. Yunli wondered if he wasn't curious about the medicine he had thrown just now. The monster started to lift herself up and looked at the bottle that was lying on the floor. She whispered, looking at him, that it was a sleeping pill. Well, that's impossible, and she knows her. She thought she was the one who killed her mother. Monster clutched her hands to her head and exclaimed that it was impossible. But before she killed her, she had already taken a whole bottle of sleeping pills. The monster exclaimed that she would never do such a thing. The protagonist grabbed the girl's hand and told her to run away from here immediately. They ran as fast as they could down the hallway, faster and faster, covered in sweat. They had already reached the front door and began to run outside. Finally, they were outside the main door. Suddenly, Yun Li heard some noise not far from them. They were already approaching a huge iron gate. A tree wants to stand still, but the wind won't stop. A child wants to take care of his parents, but they are no longer waiting. The sunset should not be allowed to become empty, for the morning sun is never sad. The blood courtyard was complete. Yun Li mumbled that they had done it and they had succeeded. Wang Ming said that he was prepared in advance for luck. He had said that there would always be a verbal battle at the end of the trial. Listen to the whispers of the gods and his wishes will be granted. So promised the voice in his ear. Could this be his reward for passing? The fulfillment of one wish or maybe a dream? Then he old Wang Ming will no longer be ceremonious. The kid raised his hand up. He wrote in gold color on the paper and raised it above his head. The golden-colored letters began to scatter and scatter around like dust. He was completely covered in inscriptions he'd written himself. But what does that mean? One organ counts as one wish. So whichever organ he gives back, he's going to die anyway. Can't even such a simple and humble wish be granted? It's a hoax. He's thought it over, and his wish is that he wants to live. So-called God, this time, he must agree. Golden plaques glowed brightly in large letters on canvas paper. The main character was surprised about the sequence of gods and the chain of logic. He wondered what this thing was. The boy looked very carefully at the letters and thought what it could be he had no way of knowing. Wang Ming was racking his brain every second. A large operating room appeared in front of him. I wonder if he's really back and he's alive. In front of him was a phone with a dagger-pierced heart on the screen. When he ripped open the sweatshirt on his chest, he saw scars. Could he be considered a human being without organs? He's alive, but it's like he's not really. Though the test is passed, but what is this sequence of gods? The main character wonders why the principal dismembered his mother and scattered her remains in the hallway. Can't events in the wishing world be explained in terms of the average person? But right now, the most important thing is to get to the hospital and get x-rays as soon as possible. Wang Ming got dressed and started to walk out heading towards the hospital. The kid went outside and started moving around the grounds toward the high gate. Meanwhile, the girl in the hat was watching him and looking at the kid smirked. She stood on the roof of the house and spoke of how in the new world he could continue to heed the whispers of the gods. Meanwhile, in the wishing world in a nursing home, a girl sat on her knees on the floor. Tears began to flow from her eyes and she saw her mom coming toward her. The girl was on her knees crying bitterly and telling her mother that she was wrong. She had no control over herself and was a foolish child. And the old lady smiled back at her and said her mom never blamed her for anything. She was the one who was a burden to her, and if it wasn't for her, things would have been very different. As the old woman pulled her hands toward her daughter, she began to change and her gaze lit up with emptiness. Bright scarlet lightning began to blaze around in the form of a barrage. The daughter could not understand what was happening. Sharp knives flew in their direction and hit her mother, cutting her into pieces. The creepy monster was talking about how worthless he was. The girl began to tell the monster that she had already killed many people for him. She asked why he couldn't leave her alone and leave her mother alone. The butcher's eyes lit up with an eerie light, and he exclaimed that her words were ridiculous. Her first desire was to be free from the bonds of ugliness. And what now? Her second wish was to resurrect her mother, and didn't God fulfill it? The butcher approached the dismembered mother and said, "Let it be in pieces." Who's to blame her for not specifying in what form she wants to resurrect her mother? The girl fell to the floor and began to cry tearfully, reaching out her hands to her mother's body. The monster grabbed her face with his creepy paw, and the girl looked into his eyes with fear. The monster said that if the next time anyone could get out of here alive, they would have no place in this world anymore. In the real world, at the Linhai People's Hospital, a woman asked where Cheng Gui had disappeared to. She can't get through to him no matter what. At that time, the protagonist looked in her direction. The woman explained that he said he would find a way to cure Old Man Liu himself. The girl called him a foolish boy because Old Man Liu was already in a vegetative state, and the doctor said he was hopeless. The other guy said he'd have to talk to him when he got back. Even though the construction company had paid out $1 million, it was impossible to spend all the money on the hospital. The boy listened to the whole conversation. He thought it must be Liu Chenggui's family. They don't know he's not coming back yet. Suddenly, the doctor opened the door and called for the next visitor, namely him. The main character was in the People's Hospital in the CT scan room. The doctor was completely covered in sweat and apologizing told the young man that the machine seemed to be broken and asked if he could come back tomorrow. Wang Ming asked how it was that the machine suddenly broke down. The doctor replied that he didn't know, but he just couldn't take pictures of his organs. He's saying it's definitely a problem with the machine, like a living person can be missing organs. His organs are really gone, which is bad news, of course. But the fact that he survived is good news. Wang Ming replied to the doctor that he was right and it was definitely their machine that had broken. The protagonist walked out onto the street of Linhai City. He looked at the sunny, bright sky. The boy thought about the fact that even though he had no organs, eating, drinking, and defecating were all normal functions of the body. Wang Ming glanced at the big board that was on the huge building. He thought about the fact that he didn't know if those functions were still working. What the hell is he thinking? He's a man of noble character and far from the lowest pleasures. What feelings and what love can there be? All these men and women, it's all unhealthy. The kid grabbed his head with his hand and decided that he would check manually himself later and find out everything. Crowds of people were walking through the streets. A girl in the crowd was wearing sunglasses and a mask. Suddenly, she paused on her high heels and peered into the crowd. The monster girl saw the one she wanted and was very pleased with it. The main character was pacing the streets of Linhai City. He was holding a cell phone in his hand. The kid scrutinized his monitor and thought to himself that this was very strange. Liu Chengui said that all the participants in the nursing home trial lived in Linhai City, but the wishing world has such a high death rate, and not a single missing person report. Wang Ming continued to stare at his phone. He took it out of his pocket as it rang. They started yelling in his ear and asking him what time it was and why he was still not at work. He was crossing his grandmother again, or he got hit by a car. Does he want his paycheck this month? The main character asked the hostess not to be angry and said that he had a minor surgery here and was on his way. He had almost forgotten about it already? The boy exhaled heavily and thought about work. In front of us is Linhai City, specifically an alleyway. Somebody told Zhu Yao that she was a homeless girl herself, but she was also protecting a stray cat. She was asked if perhaps she had found a soulmate and laughed. The girl cried and asked how they could burn a cat with a cigarette. But the two guys laughed and asked her to stop talking. He says one last time to give him the cat or show him your rabbits. Two guys were laughing at the poor girl. She held the cat against her and asked them not to do that. She promised to give them money. The guys immediately thought about money and looked at each other. Apparently, they didn't want the money and told the poor girl that they didn't want the money. They began to reach for her with their filthy hands. She was very frightened and excited. Suddenly, she heard a guy's voice. The brother was talking about helping her. The blonde-haired guy started running towards the girl as fast as possible to save her from those rascals. The assailants asked who was here. The guy ran as fast as he could in their direction. When the kid ran up, he thought it was bad and slipped and fell. As luck would have it, he slipped right in front of these guys and fell face down in front of them. One of those rascals thought about who it was, and when he realized, he smiled contemptuously. He said it was Lin Yushu's brat and stepped on his foot with his boot. He asked if he and his forces wanted to play hero. Lin Yushu laughed and replied that he did. He explained to the guys that bullying a girl was no fun and it was better to let them beat him up. He talked about how he was very tough. Then the boys decided to fulfill his wish and started kicking him from all sides. They told him that he didn't appreciate their kindness and hid his organs perfectly. Lin Yushu told his brothers that if they beat him, then she would not be touched anymore. He asked them to hit him lightly and not to touch his face. Zhu Yao asked them not to hit the guy. The cat meowed very pitifully in her arms. Then the guy said with a scornful glance at the girl that if she undressed herself, then they would stop. The girl wouldn't stop crying. She was very scared and sad. The girl clutched the cat as tightly to her as she could and blushed with shame and embarrassment. They started saying, looking at the girl, that if she didn't want to undress, then they would trample him. The guys kept kicking their feet and stepping on the head of this poor kid who was lying on the ground. Zhu Yao asked those rascals to stop beating the kid and promised to get naked. They said it would have been so immediate, and the brothers wouldn't have had to make her do it. Lin Yushu began to scream and beg the girl not to undress. A trickle of blood ran down his mouth. He kept reaching for her and begging her not to. The boy couldn't get to his feet. The kid said if she took her clothes off, he got punched in the face for nothing. The scoundrels held onto the rail and began peering at the girl, forcing her to undress. There was some noise behind them, and one of the men turned his head in that direction. He thought something was wrong hearing such a noise. Behind them stood the protagonist with a bat in his hands. He said he thought something was wrong, but there were only 2 bedbugs. Don't let them say he didn't give them a chance. The kid said he'd count to 3, and then they'd be sorry if they didn't get out. The villains began to ask who he was looking at him fearfully. But the kid advised to mind his own business and kept counting to 3. Wang Ming told them that they were not running away and laughed. He realized that they were staying. The boy laughed evilly when he heard that they were not going to run away. The protagonist laughed even harder and exclaimed that if they did, they were finished. One of the rascals mumbled that this guy looked very intimidating. The other asked him to leave immediately, and they began to turn around, running away. When the protagonist counted to 3, he turned towards his opponents. One of the guys told his bro that he kind of missed 1 and 2. Wang Ming wondered if he was thinking of teaching him. The main character avenged the girl and the kid who was lying on the floor covered in blood. The guys started yelling that they were wrong and asked not to be punched in the face. The boy dealt with these scoundrels to the fullest. The boys started yelling that they would not do it again and ran away. Lin Yushu got up from the ground and thanked his brother for saving him. He said that he would have actually handled them himself. Wang Ming laughed back and asked if he was telling the truth. The boy reached out his hand toward the girl and asked if she was okay. The girl gave him a hand in return and replied that it was okay. She immediately thanked the boy. The girl looked at him carefully and asked if he was Wang Ming. She was very surprised to see him. The main character was also very surprised and asked if she knew him and how she knew him. The girl replied that she knew, and he probably didn't remember that he used to be her classmate. Unexpectedly, Lin Yushu came over and said that it was a tradition at their school to save girls. Wang Ming replied that he kept wondering where he had seen that uniform. If she hadn't told him, he wouldn't have remembered. The protagonist withdrew the arm that Lin Yushu had put around his shoulders in a friendly manner. He mumbled that he was glad they were okay and that he had to get to work. The girl looked after the boy with sad eyes and a little blushing repeated his name. Wang Ming stepped aside and looking in front of him thoughtfully. And by the way, he doesn't know where he's going. The boy looked up at the bright, bright sky. Suddenly he heard the sound of heels and paused. The girl stopped not far from him. He listened and realized there was someone unlike a human behind him. The girl mumbled that he wasn't going anywhere. Wang Ming asked who she was. He looked at her and decided that he thought he had seen this woman somewhere. She put her hand out in front of her and said, approaching her, that it was his fault for what had happened to her. The girl threatened to kill him immediately. The protagonist realized that the conductor was in front of him. He froze in anticipation and began to compare the events that had happened to him earlier. She was very quickly beside him, and her teeth glowed with ghastly fangs instead of teeth. He had a very familiar feeling. The boy glowed with bright fiery beams. He was completely shrouded in bloody lightning. The monster girl's hand reached towards him. She began to approach him for an attack. The girl shouted that he would not run away from her. Again, bright orange and golden lightning bolts swirled around the protagonist. He was disappearing from her sight, and she begged for him to come back to her sooner rather than later. The monster kept running after him. Wang Ming decided that this was simply unbelievable, and he had entered the wishing world just now. The protagonist held his hands on his head and thought about looking in front of him. A huge long table was set up with people sitting around it. There were different dishes on the table. The boy couldn't understand what had just happened. The conductor was from the world of desire, and how she ended up in the real world. How did he suddenly enter the world of desire? This thing is forcibly pulling people in. That's a setup. The guy was wearing a bright yellow suit and was very surprised by this. He asked who these people were and how he got here. So that's what the wishing world is like, granting all wishes. People couldn't understand what was going on. They were clutching their heads and were frightened. One of the people at the table asked everyone to calm down. The girl asked those around her to look at their plates and raised hers in front of her. The main character thought about it and listened to this girl too. He lifted his plate, and on it lay some paper with writing on it. The inscription turned into a blood-red light and glowed with a crimson haze. This house was in a cemetery, and they have to live there for 10 days. That's certain death. But this is a wishing world, and there are no ghosts. The graveyard is sad, but judging by these keywords, the theme of the challenge is going to be grim. One of the guys asked not to panic and said their situation wasn't that bad. Wang Ming recognized that voice. In front of him was Lin Yushu and Zhu Yao. The three of them had entered this world at the same time. In the wishing world, in the dining room on the first floor, the guys continued to sit at the table and discuss what was happening. One participant asked everyone else not to panic and said it's not all bad. Wang Ming heard familiar voices and saw two people he knew in front of him. He really got into the wishing world with these guys at the same time. It's also got multiplayer. One of the guys exclaimed that they were living in a graveyard, and wasn't that enough to consider the situation bad? Lin Yushu replied that they were wrong. Had they ever lived in such a fancy villa, and had they ever eaten such exquisite food? To spend 10 days here at your own pleasure, and at the end of it to fulfill your wish is not cool. There was no way out of here anyway, so he suggested we eat first. The other guys noticed that this guy was right. Wang Ming didn't think this kid was so optimistic. He looked at him with a curious look. Lin Yushu was indeed in a good mood and did not panic. The guy started saying that the food here was really good and the wine wasn't bad. Wang Ming felt that something strange was about to pop out and decided to look around just in case. It was the aftermath of a bloody nursing home, and the kid went to the main entrance. Wang Ming tried to open the door but noticed that it was locked, but there was a lot of light in the villa and a light fragrance of flowers. On the first floor, there is a living room, kitchen, dining room, and tea room. The second floor has an exercise room, computer room, office, walk-in closet, and several bedrooms of varying sizes. He saw a huge mirror and many different objects in front of him and began to move on. The kid had already gone up to the third floor and noticed that there was a glassed-in veranda with plants on the third floor. There's a storage room, a music room, a room full of dolls, and the rest of the rooms are empty, and there's room to spread out. The boy began to descend into the world of desire in the living room on the first floor of the villa. The participants were sitting on the couch and laughing amicably. The protagonist thought that perhaps this was the right way to interact with the world of desire. One of the participants was still intimidated, and droplets of sweat were running down his face. He wondered if the guys thought the Sadako wouldn't come out of there now. The boy pointed towards the window where nothing could be seen. He was told that it couldn't be. But the one who said it immediately laughed without exclaiming that he was joking. The girl sat with her pillow against her chest and was called a coward. The trial had not yet begun, and she was already scared. Lin Yushu told Zhu not to be afraid since he was with her. If Sadako dares to get out, he'll scream chrysanthemum monster. No sooner had he said those words than the chandelier shook, and they couldn't understand what was happening. Everyone looked up toward the ceiling. Why the light suddenly began to flicker was unclear. It was already dark outside, and a bright blue haze enveloped everything around the trees and the well. The boys looked out the window and saw a well in front of them. They were talking about how this was the right well. Is Sadako really going to climb out of it? One of the contestants said it's all nonsense. It's just that the signal is bad, and they're making a fool of themselves. How could there be ghosts in here when everything's so nice? But the monster's hand had already broken through the glass. A monster girl began to emerge from this glass and hold out her hands towards the guys. Lin Yushu was very surprised and grabbed Zhu Xiao's shoulder. He exclaimed that she was really here. The monster started walking over to the guys and grabbed the girl by the head. She started gouging out her eyes. The girl begged for help and streams of scarlet blood flowed from her eyes. The monster continued to weaponize and kill the guy. The guy was really scared. The boys couldn't understand if he was dead. There was no limit to their fear. The participants wanted to run away and everyone threw themselves wherever they could. The protagonist clenched his fists. He walked over to the one red button and decided to press it. He decided to turn it off. The monster's gaze immediately changed and began to extinguish. Her fangs were very creepy and nasty. The monster pulled its paws forward and slowly began to dissolve as if disappearing. Wang Ming lifted his phone up and looked at the monster. One of the guys remarked that it was very good that this guy was savvy. The other one asked if Sadako had disappeared. So you should have just turned off the TV. Could it be that this bro's words are coming true? Lin Yushu noticed that this guy said Sadako and she appeared, and it's very suspicious. Suddenly he has some sort of ability to make words come true, and in the wishing world, it's possible. He asked to say that he had a Diaoshan hanging on his belt to prove that it wasn't true. The boy immediately repeated those words. Lin Yushu asked him to speak louder and more confidently. He immediately looked at his belt. It's safe to say he doesn't have the ability to translate words into reality. One of the guys mumbled that one person had died so quickly and how would they survive these 10 days? The participant replied that in the beginning, the death rate is always the highest, and you just need to understand the rules and avoid danger. The player's name was Meng Yumian. The guy replied that he didn't remember that everyone who saw the movie dies in the end. The main character said that not necessarily if the rules were like in the movie, turning off the TV wouldn't help. Meng Yumian mumbled that Sadako was a ghost from a Japanese movie, and they had seen her before, which means there may be a woman with a slit mouth next. The protagonist said, looking at the guys, that her special ability was most likely a sequence of gods. Lin Yushu replied that he immediately realized that Wang Ming was not an easy person. He didn't expect him to know about the god sequence. Luck is his sequence of gods. Therefore, he can be calm, and all who are with him are under the protection of luck. There are so many rooms here on the second floor, they surely wouldn't be found by a woman with her mouth cut open. Suddenly, they heard someone's voice outside the door. Someone was asking if she was beautiful. Wang Ming exclaimed that he believed the guy's lies, and it seems like it's more of a setback. Lin Yushu replied with his hand on his head, saying that it must have been an accident. The door was already shattering into small shards. A female monster came into the room asking if she was beautiful. She started laughing and talking about making them as beautiful as she was. The boys couldn't understand how she had gotten here and were staring in horror. The female monster kept laughing and asking if she was beautiful. It approached the boys faster and faster, reaching out its ugly paws. The protagonist decided it looked like he was going to have to fight and put his hand up. It glowed with bright golden colors, and the monster woman kept talking about how beautiful she was. The kid swirled in red and orange lightning bolts and tried to confront the monster. He began to use all of his abilities to protect his life and the lives of those around him. The kid asked the woman not to be so beautiful in her next life. And here was the world of desire, the living room on the first floor of the villa. The woman was in a bright flame of colorful rays. Wang Ming decided that it was like that, and this girl participant had specifically mentioned a woman with a slit mouth. The kid thought she was checking them out and threw a scornful, questioning look at her. Lin Yushu wondered what they were standing for and, taking his friend by the shoulder, asked her to run away quickly. The guys started scattering to wherever they were going. Mostly they started climbing up the stairs to the top. The monster approached one of the guys and began to reach out her vile paws toward him. She smiled wryly and asked where he was running off to and then laughed. The boy was very scared and didn't know where to run. He fell on his knees and covered himself with his hands. The monster woman kept laughing and asking if she was pretty, approaching the guy. She waved her hand and began to attack the poor kid, who was already completely covered in blood. She killed this guy, and there was a pool of blood on the floor. She just chopped him up into little pieces. The monster kept asking if she was pretty and smiling into her creepy fangs. She started approaching the other guy and asked the same question. The guy exclaimed that she hadn't disappeared, which meant she'd keep killing. The guys continued to run away faster and faster. Wang Ming in turn saw the room. It was the exact room he was familiar with, and he began to open the door slowly. He looked through the slit and thought of her coming up the stairs. If she comes in, we'll have to take our chances. He was holding some kind of map with a yellow circle in the middle. Lin Wan and Zhu Xiao were sitting at the table. They called out to the protagonist and waved at him. The guy asked his bro not to worry because they would probably be fine. Wang Ming was very surprised that they were also here. He wondered what the kid meant about for sure. Lin Yushu explained that unless he was mistaken, it was an item he had gotten in the previous game. In previous games, he's gotten a special ability too,